coming out was one thing, and coming out in the workplace is one thing, but now it's, I don't want to be just merely tolerated. It is about that support, why we're here today, for example, raising awareness and just, for everyone to embrace diversities of all kinds, and making, the most of it, and seeing it as a positive.
Well, everyone, welcome to this special edition of Diversifying Kubrick Voices. Pride Month calls for its own collab across podcasts, so I'm glad to have Joe helping me co-host this one. Taking over as an ally. I'm here to help facilitate conversation, ask questions, but really this is for you all to share experiences in the workplace, out the workplace, whatever we feel like talking about. It's our moment just to have a chat about Pride, what it means to us. So, Joe, do you want to take it away? Introduce yourself, your role at Kubrick, pronouns?
Absolutely. I'm Joe. My pronouns are he, him. I've been at Kubrick for 2.5 years, just over. Currently, I'm the commercial analytics manager at Kubrick. I work in the commercial arm of the business for Simon Walker, one of our managing partners, focused very much on our client team and our recruitment team. More broadly, I am a member of our diversity champions, and a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I'm gay. And yeah, that's me.
Amazing. And our lovely guests, we've got Fabian and Han. Welcome to the show. Fabian, introduce yourself, what you do at Kubrick.
Yeah,
pronouns.
I'm Fabian. My pronouns are he, him, and I've been with Kubrick for just a couple of months now. I work in HR. I'm an HR project manager, and I work on a variety of projects, which is to include some of the stuff that we do in the diversity and inclusion space. And I'm also a member of the LGBTQ community. I'm a gay man, and that's it for now. I'm looking forward to exploring a bit more about what Pride means to us and other things.
Thanks, Fabian. And Han.
Sure. My name's Han. I use they, them pronouns, and I've been with Kubrick for around just over 6 months. I'm a data engineer consultant on client site at the moment, and I'm also part of the Diversity Champions. I'm also part of the LGBT plus community. I'm a queer non-binary person. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Oh, thanks for joining. I mean, it's Pride Month, today, June 8th, just a week in. What have you all been doing to celebrate, acknowledge Pride so far this month? What are you looking forward to?
That's a great question. I think the big thing for me, at least at the start of this Pride Month, we've been working quite closely on how Kubrick can celebrate Pride, but myself, it's always a good excuse for me to sort of really embed myself in the sort of wider LGBTQ plus community, where, and I think we'll talk about this later, but it's quite easy, especially, it was quite easy for me to sort of like put things on the back burner a little bit. So it's very nice for me to be able to focus down, read some interesting articles, understand the space. I know Fabian and I were talking earlier, and I think you remember the link that you shared around where the UK is in terms of Europe's acceptance of LGBTQ+. So it was a very interesting article to read, and a number of other things like that. So and then sort of broadly into Kubrick, we kicked off our sort of celebration of Pride last week, on sort of an overarching post. I think this week that we're currently recording is around LGBTQ people in tech. Very, very great article written by Fabian that was sent around internally. Next week, charity. We've identified a really cool local charity that supports LGBTQ plus people. And then finally, when this podcast comes out, sort of focusing a little bit on the Kubrick voices and the voices inside Kubrick.
Amazing. And for you both, how's the month been so far, and what are you looking forward to, and what hopefully will our listeners have done when this comes out at the end of the month?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of like internal reflection, I think. Like last Pride, I did a lot of exploration of my own gender, so I think I'm doing that again, just kind of settling with myself, like how I feel, taking that time out. And I think, doing a lot of like self-education around wider issues in the community, and then just and seeing about our history as well. reading some books, and just celebrating really with my friends and the community. Just kind of like, this is our month, and have a lot of fun really.
Very good. And well, it's very similar. It's an opportunity for self-reflection, I suppose, and to amplify a little bit the kind of discussions that we need to have around the LGBTQ plus space. I think there's plenty going on. I mean, personally, I like to write. I've written a couple of articles, and that's just something I like doing, putting my reflections down on paper or virtual paper, and looking at where, how far we've gone, especially in that space, what's still to be, what does need to happen, but keeping always, again, that acknowledgement of progress, but also a critical eye on what is going on. And I think this is where Pride is important, because of that opportunity to amplify those voices and to kind of have that extra forum as well. So really to make the most of it so that it keeps resonating all the way through the rest of the year as well.
For so many people in the community and outside the community, Pride on the outside can seem like it's a big parade, and that's what Pride actually is. And I think COVID, taking away that element of Pride for the last couple of years, although excitingly it is coming back this year, everyone's kind of had to think of alternative ways to celebrate and acknowledge. So for those listeners, viewers who want to know what those alternative ways of celebrating are, or self-reflection, for instance, a lot of people might not have ever even embarked on that journey when it comes to self-reflection within how they feel about themselves, their friends, others, understanding about the community. How do you kind of recommend going about that? And what are the sort of other ways that we can celebrate if this year you're not quite ready to get back into the physical party space? What would you guys all recommend doing?
I'll go on the education kind of side, because I think there's plenty of fascinating stuff out there to read, and it's about it's very interesting what what you're saying about seeing it as the parade and the very kind of positive and flamboyant kind of side of things, which is great. It's great that it's out there. I think it's remembering where Pride came from, remembering that it all started with the Stonewall riots, with a lot of kind of struggles about gay rights, and really looking at that balance on those both sides. I feel very much that the rights that have been acquired over the years, we can't just take them for granted. There are rights that we need to keep, going and maintain and do more for it. I mean, simply, last 24 hours, scrolling through my social media, LGBTQ plus people were called disgusting, obscene, a cancer on society, and that is just on stuff that is out there for people to see, and that is basically an attack or really things that are felt deeply personally by a number of people out there. So again, without going too far down the doom and gloom route, I think there really is a need to acknowledge that it's not that all the progress that has happened, which is excellent, shouldn't take away some of the struggles that are still there, some of the opinions which are trying to take back some of those rights actually that have been won over the past those past few years. So again, that probably isn't the fun side of the alternative. I think education, and for people especially who don't know necessarily an awful lot, I've got a number of friends who, for example, you've got a lot of different ways of expressing your LGBTQ plus identity, which don't necessarily mean an awful lot to a lot of people. There's so much resources out there to learn a bit more about, and simply just reading or listening to individual stories as well. They're all very powerful accounts of what it means today, to be an LGBTQ plus person.
Yeah, and we're so grateful to have you all speaking on it, but also at the same time, it's not your job or responsibility to educate people, right? Just because you can and you're very willing, and we're very grateful that you want to amplify your voices. It's important that individuals empower themselves to educate themselves, rather than it's not your job to teach everyone around you, and that's also an exhausting existence as well. I mean, yeah, what's your experience been with people kind of coming to you as a single source of truth, maybe?
I think it's definitely something that, especially sort of, in my younger years growing up and in that space, that I come from a town in the middle of Warwickshire. There wasn't a vibrant community. In fact, Hannah and I were talking about this the other day around like that space that you grew up in, it was quite isolating, quite small, and so even people who wanted to learn, you became that single source of truth, or you were that space. And I think Pride gives us this really great opportunity to, there are individuals who are obviously more than happy to have these conversations with anybody that wants to have them, but there are individuals out in the space who really champion LGBTQ plus rights. And actually, Pride gives us a really great ability to really identify those people. I know one of the things that I'm very keen on doing during Pride Month, and I've already started, is sort of going on various social media sites, LinkedIn, Twitter, identifying these people and broader media, and identifying these really cool people who are sort of championing rights in their own way. I know personally, I sort of went through that whole sexuality space inside LGBTQ plus the community when I was sort of coming out and going through that space, but in terms of the sort of gender conversation, it's not something I'm particularly well versed in, and so this month especially, I'm really trying to push to sort of broaden my, I have lots of people that I follow that are queer men, queer women who talk about their understanding the sexuality space, but not that many in the broader queer community. So I think it's really important that I'm taking that time, and I push everyone to take that time just to identify a couple of really key people that you could sort of lean on yourself, even if you're part of the community, even if you're not, to educate yourself more.
Absolutely. And I think as well, not just your physical geography and isolation as a sort of single source of truth, but the fact that one person can't be a single source of truth if your journey yourself is changing. I mean, Han, you've kind of already mentioned that every year you kind of take this time to stop and think about, it's not a fixed moment, the way you feel as part of the community and your identity. It itself is changing. So how can you be that single source of truth if you're still on an ongoing journey yourself? I mean, how have you found your journey over the last few years? How do you find expressing your experiences with others, and how are some of the ways that you're celebrating with your friends this month?
I completely agree with everything that's been said. I think the journey has been quite a roller coaster, and it's really hard because often when I meet new people, I'm the first queer person they've met, or the first person who's non-binary, and it can be quite a difficult time explaining something that might change over time, and it might be quite confusing when they see later on that space has changed for me. And so it can be really tough, but at the same time I want people to stay curious. I do appreciate people want to learn more, but often sources of information I've found to take me through this journey has been online and my own research that other people can find themselves. I think, and a lot of my journey has come from having conversations with people about their own identification and their own journey. Kind of puts questions in my own head and leads me to research things that I might not have found on my own. So I think, talking with people has actually helped me a lot in terms of finding out who I really am and what I want to celebrate. That's
amazing. Yeah, I think we can all appreciate that we can't fix things down anyway. I mean, no one has a clue what this accent is, because it's somewhere between American and English. Nothing is fixed, and as much as we want to identify people as a thing, you often can't. And I think as well, it's about people opening their minds up to that idea that even if you ask someone for an identity, they might not necessarily have one that you can understand, or that there's even a language for yet. So definitely an ongoing journey. But I mean, when it comes to things being fixed or maybe stereotyped, Fabian, you had a great article on your blog that you shared yesterday, which I loved reading, about stereotypes as well in the space, and how you identify with them, don't identify with them. What's been your kind of experience with stereotyping?
Well, it's been quite interesting because, in there I'm calling myself a boring gay because I sometimes feel like it. So, for example, me and my partner had a civil partnership a few years back, and and I think people around me were an awful lot more excited about it than we. No, we were very excited about it, obviously. But everyone had that image of this massive, extravagant gay wedding that they were all going to, have an opportunity to go to. Where actually we just went into the registry office with a couple of witnesses and had that very low key. Still a wonderful day, and really, loved it and loved what it stood for. But yeah, people were feeling very let down about and had that view of what it meant. There's various different ways, and I think again back to the way things change. There's also different ways for people to live their identity. In my case, it's been more of a journey that has been more well individual to an extent, or with friends, but not necessarily in the LGBTQ plus community. But yeah, there's different expectations, and it's always that need to remain open to what it means to people, and that just between ourselves, it means very different things in how we experience it, and that's another thing for people to start appreciating. Now, there's a very light-hearted way of thinking about those those stereotypes, I think, which which is relatively harmless, but as long as it comes from a place where people appreciate that. There isn't a truth about what being a gay man looks like and feels like, and a tick list that needs to be filled. Otherwise, I would have failed. I would have to give back my gay membership card a long time ago. So.
Yeah. What about you, Joe? Any stereotypes you're fighting? You're conforming to? Do you feel?
It's a very interesting one that I don't particularly consider myself with that stereotype in mind. I don't think I particularly conform to that. And maybe growing up, I think that was very much a decision. It was sitting there going, hadn't really been comfortable with myself at that point. And, I don't want to be that stereotype. I don't want to be that kind of person. And actually, in the 7 years that I've been out, I think I've sort of more relaxed into my own interpretation of what a gay man should be, in my opinion, for me, even, and whether that's embracing the kind of like visual stuff. As an example, my partner and I, we were putting up artwork in our house this weekend, and we've just got a very nice sort of rainbow like poster, and it's the first thing that I've ever had sort of up in my house or in my flat or in my bedroom that's actually really obvious, and it looks amazing. It was a very good choice by him. But it's really exciting, and then equally just sort of engaging more and more in not just the sort of the space that we've talked about before around the various people that you can speak to, but also just sort of engaging in queer media. I've pushed heavily this very good Netflix TV show that I'm very much enjoying at the moment, called Heartstoppers. But more broadly, anything around that queer space that 10 years ago was seen as like career suicide for anybody to actually be part of, and therefore didn't exist. And all of the comments that have come off, especially that show, but more broadly, is I wish that was there when I was 12, 15, 18, rather than now that I'm in my later 20s, but I won't get into that. That kind of thing is definitely there. So I think that, and it's the journey piece, right? It's I think that I'm comfortable with myself and my own sexuality. But I do think there's more steps I can take, and there's more steps to feel that kind of, less sort of fighting against a stereotype that, really shouldn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm fair in saying we've got a bit of a representation of different generations around the table. Won't say who's a Gen. Yeah. I mean, Han, are you a Gen Z? Borderline?
99, so...
Yes, I think it's the 96. Sneaks into millennial. I want to sign. I'd love to hear everyone kind of reflect on that. And, Fabian, did you know anyone that identified?
Came out before you were born.
Yeah, but did you have Han's language to describe identity growing up? And Han, how have you found kind of the quote, not to make you represent all of Gen Z, but do you believe that you have a kind of stronger language or understanding, or how has your kind of conversations been with people of your generation?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've had a lot of conversations with people of different generations, and it's definitely differed for me, but It's quite like I can't just take that as to that whole generation is completely like just blind to it all. I think there is almost overwhelmingly too many, like not too many, but like so many definitions out there, and words to describe yourself. I think like even seeing generations younger than me, it's so nice to see how proud they are, and how there's been a lot more kind of self-discovery, I think, a lot younger. Whereas I didn't feel like I really had that, even though it was maybe around me, it just wasn't accessible. But yeah, I've definitely tried having conversations with other generations and trying to change my language a lot. But I think one thing that is across generations, that everyone's very willing to listen and keep an open mind and learn. I think everyone wants to learn. So yeah, I think now, like, that knowledge is out there for everyone. I think it doesn't matter like what generation you come from, you can still kind of reflect and find out what fits with you, if you want a definition at all.
It's a very interesting contrast, I suppose, into the amount of information and perhaps of what was out there. I came out it was 97, 98, so a little while back, and back then there was hardly anything to refer back to, and I grew up in a little village in the countryside, which I mean, it was even understanding it and for yourself, because it's such an alien concept, is the first step, because it as far as you're concerned, is not meant to exist. So that's the first kind of step that you need to get through. And I was met, coming out first, I was met with the can it be cured kind of response. Now we luckily didn't go down that route, and that was just a knee-jerk kind of response, and things moved on from there. So it was quite tough at the time, and all I had was people around me, friends, to then talk about it, which were all very responsive and helpful in those times as well, and made it feel quite normal. So I feel quite lucky in that sense. And in contrast, I think in the world of work, interestingly, it's something that from the early 2000s and early on in my career is something that I've been very open about, and apart from the odd clumsy kind of joke or has been quite well accepted as well from everyone around me in the work environment that I was in. Luckily as well. Now I had to select sometimes where it was appropriate, safe, etc. So it wasn't necessarily 100% of the time, but in most cases, and obviously in the environment we're here now, it's almost a no-brainer. I mean, in a place like Kubrick, in terms of actually sharing those things, bearing in mind that again I've been very open about it for quite a while, and it's interesting because the conversation is moving on when it comes to it. To me, it's coming out was one thing, and coming out in the workplace is one thing, but now it's I don't want to be just merely tolerated. It is about that support, why we're here today, for example, raising awareness and just for everyone to embrace diversities of all kinds, and making the most of it and seeing it as a positive, really.
Yeah. And I mean, how have you found different industries as well? You worked in quite a few, and now you're kind of coming into tech as maybe quite a different space. How have you found across industries, corporate, startup, all those kinds of environments? Have there been different receptions to celebrating Pride, or do you think it's kind of a general movement now across industries to get where we are now?
So it's interesting. So I've worked in a few different industries. I was, in the oil and gas sector, in defense, in FMCG before that, and in places like more recent was, oil and gas or energy and defense, which again you probably wouldn't associate necessarily. That the challenge came more from the external perception rather than the energy that you've got inside the organization. Those were large organizations, so from the LGBT community to to get together to drive initiatives was wonderful, and and still is. There is more of a challenge of being seen as doing something that is quite progressive in an industry that is seen as more traditional, and therefore it's you almost have an extra hurdle to go over to do that quite openly. So there were more challenges that I suppose we might have here in the tech sector. But for what I've experienced in tech, again, the environment we're in is quite open from what I can see. What I can see in tech as well is the opportunity of playing a part in moving not just the dialogue, but actually tech plays a huge part in driving acceptance and other things, just in the way that everything is developed, is used. So I think there's plenty here to be done, and more so moving forward still.
Exactly. We're in this new industry where our own company is only 5-6 years old. We have a chance to build it from the ground up, but I guess there are still hurdles within data and tech when it comes to things like gender identity and how we kind of even record data to begin with.
I think it's interesting because the intention is very much there. The support is there. Everyone knows what's the right thing to do and wants to be supportive. And I think it's now across tech generally that step of, well, what does it mean in practice? And actually putting all of these kind of intentions into action is kind of where I feel that we are very much.
And Han, you're not only starting your career with Kubrick, but also starting it then with a client, and it's almost like you've had to do it twice, the whole onboarding intro. How have you found joining client, joining Kubrick? Is there kind of a nice kind of transition between them, or did you kind of have your apprehensions about going on site to another new place and how you might approach your identity and things in another workplace as a Kubrick consultant?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. Coming to Kubrick and getting comfortable there was really nice. Like, build up a group around you who, accept you for who you are. And it was a great space to introduce myself with my pronouns. But going to a client site is like another ballpark, really. It's like you're representing Kubrick. You don't want to mess anything up. And it's kind of crazy that you think just being yourself would mess something up, but you just don't. I think there's this kind of wall where you don't know what's on the other side, and I think until you get there and really see what kind of diversity program they have, like the people there, you don't really know what's going to happen. I think with the client I'm at, it's quite a big company, and that can be quite overwhelming. You don't want to introduce yourself and your life story every single time you meet someone, otherwise those meetings won't have any work content to them. But I think you don't have to be like upfront with who you are all the time. Like, people can find that out eventually. And I think it's important that, people value the quality of your work as a consultant rather than who you are. And that kind of comes first, really. They care that you do a good job. Which I think's really nice. But then it is nice to also connect on those other levels. Like, they've got lots of panels for the Pride Month about some important speakers about like bisexual awareness and trans awareness in the financial sector, which is really nice. And they have an LGBT and allies network, which I think is a really nice way to kind of like, you can't have this conversation at work all the time, but give a space for those people to talk about like their other part of their life, which you should be able to bring to work anyway. So
yeah, I love that. I love that our consultants aren't just sort of like siloed away from the business that they're at, but they have our networks, they have the client networks. If they want to get involved, all of a sudden you find you're part of this much bigger community than you ever really realized, and had loads of resources at your disposal. It's amazing that our clients do kind of encourage that. And you kind of mentioned before, even coming on here, that sort of popped in your diary, you're off to do a diversity thing, and no one's going to turn that down. It's very much, people are not just accepting of you finding the space to discuss it, but really encouraging of making sure that everyone finds those spaces and carves out that time in the day, because work isn't really as separate from our personal lives as maybe it used to be, and it's finding that balance is quite tricky, I know. we've talked about it before as well. How do you be your authentic self at work, whatever that means to you, but also have enough separation that you can go home to your personal life? I mean, you're also trained as a consultant and came in-house, so you've seen Kubrick through a big evolution, and you kind of bring that perspective to the table. How have you found being at Kubrick the last couple of years through a really big period of growth, and how has pride and diversity moved up the agenda for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, joining Kubrick, I was sort of one of probably 400 people or so that worked at Kubrick at that point. Now we're pushing 1,100, 1,200, something like that. You know, massive growth, and there was that kind of implied security and implied acceptance. You know, very much that startup mentality of, you know, you are who you are. We're not going to, you know, there's no prejudice, there's no discrimination, but it's not a talking point on the agenda, as it were. It's just there as an implication. You know, I had long conversations with a couple of senior people in the business about, you know, almost accepting it as the norm, and having that kind of like ability for me to be able to come along to a meeting and answer honestly when somebody goes, "What are you up to this weekend?" and go, "Oh, I'm visiting my partner's, you know, family," you know, that kind of thing. Having that ability there without having to, as Han said, go through the whole, well, I came out when I was this age and all of this, you know, all of those kind of things. And I think it's really great to see, and I suppose I have the benefit of seeing the evolution through Kubrick. You know, moving from that kind of back end sort of generic acceptance to a lot more of our sort of structured understanding of what we can do around the DEI space and the LGBTQ plus space. Diversity Champions is a great example of this. That, you know, the idea that would have existed 2.5 years ago at Kubrick was just not on the agenda, not in a bad way, just it hadn't really been considered. Growth was a big focus there, and now we're sort of sitting going, well, actually, let's do right, and let's actually be a force of change and a force of a good change, as it were, inside the business. And having Fabian here with, you know, when I joined, there wasn't an HR, and so now that there is one, and it's a huge one, and there was a big push there. We've got our DEI head of DEI job that's currently we're being headhunting for at the moment. So, you know, there's a lot of growth and a lot of direction that would be really exciting.
Yeah, I think we've kind of always had this idea that we're building the technology workforce, whatever, you know, that kind of really depersonalizes it. But I think the last couple of years we've really understood what that actually means, and every organization in every sector is trying to become more inclusive, you know, for the sake of creating an environment people actually want to work, because churn is a problem, all those things. But I think we've all realized at Kubrick we have an actual responsibility to bring in a diverse and inclusive workforce, because we are creating this workforce with training and going out to clients and everything like that. So the responsibility is a big one, and it's heavy, but I think we're doing well.
It's such an opportunity, though, I find, with the way that we work, with the model that we've got, you know, of training people, you know, getting people paid while they're trained, and opening up, you know, to a wide you know, pool of people, basically. So it's something that needs to be explored, you know, further into how do we do more in that space, because the opportunity is definitely there in making that difference, in not just as you said, not just, you know, kind of plugging the gap or helping build the tech capability, but really, you know, making that a diverse, you know, tech capability.
Yeah, I think thanks everyone for joining me on this special crossover episode. Yeah, it's been a great chat, and you know, any kind of final words for listeners, anything kind of any points you didn't get across, or any resources you want to point anyone to, or just, you know, encourage everyone to have a good Pride. Any last words from our guests?
To go first.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, and Fabian talked about it earlier. Pride's an incredibly important time, and it's not just a time for celebration, but it's also a time for education. It's also a time to understand, you know, to really map out the road and understand that we're not at the end of that road. And so what I would push for is that you know, celebration is a really integral part of this month, and celebrating who you are, and celebrating you know, the strides we've come in, you know, in the last 60, 50 years. You know, it's a huge space, but there's there's much more to do. So educating yourself on those kind of things, broadening your horizons in terms of the media you consume, the people that you listen to, the thing, even if it is just for the month, it's good to have that view. But then equally, Pride is 1 month out of 12, but it's important to have that view all the way through the year. And so, identifying various, keeping the learning going, and go beyond June the 30th, I think is really, really important.
Perhaps just reflecting briefly as well on that this is all about just diversity, generally speaking, just about celebrating people as they are, and just calling out without kind of watering down the importance to keep educating and talking about LGBTQ plus and LGBTQ plus rights, but also thinking about intersectionality, other characteristics, and just bringing back that broader view of diversity, that it's, regardless of your characteristics with regards to sexual orientation or ethnicity or anything else, basically, that there's also a general message of acceptance throughout the month of Pride that needs to be celebrated.
Intersectionality is I guess key, and a whole other podcast, hopefully, that I hope we get to speak about, because there's a bunch to say, but I'm glad that you flagged that at the end, and everyone at least has a moment to think about what intersectionality, what they understand about it, what they can learn more about it. So really appreciate that. And Han?
Yeah, I would say that I think, intersectionality and kind of allowing voices from these marginalised communities have their say. Like, there's a lot of, like, even this, like, having queer people here to talk about their own experiences. And I think, coming from that, just remember that, like, our experiences aren't just the one view. Like, I think it's just, this continual education beyond this month. And just keep looking, I guess.
Thanks all for joining. Happy Pride, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.